Hi, my name is Rick Dellaratta. I am a jazz musician, pianist, vocalist, composer, and I have kind of an interesting journey, partially because of the events of 9/11. It kind of provoked me to start something called Jazz for Peace. And that kind of led me into a very interesting journey that I could burn up this half an hour like without even even touching the surface of, because it's led me to so many different places that even though I had traveled so much as a jazz musician and as just a regular, just as a musician in general, touring with all kinds of bands and as a as a leader and all that stuff, then Jasper Peace started really taking me to places. For example, to burn up a half an hour in 2 seconds, I could literally talk about my favorite full moons. One of them was off the coast of Ghana, and so here I am now. Someone wants me to do a concert at the home, the birthplace of Kwame Nkrumah, who we should know who this guy is. It's pretty amazing, his story. But we don't, because we're getting Western information and not really information that's really viable to all of us as a species, to the whole world. But I get educated about stuff like that. And so here I am being taken out to his birthplace, which is all the way on the coast. And, they put me in this cottage, and they said, listen, whatever you do, don't go in that water. It's full of sharks. So, I'm eyeballing that water. I see a full moon, and I'm like, there's no way I'm going to miss out on this. This place doesn't even have electricity. They just had electricity in part of the city. 6 years ago, they got electricity in just a little part of the city that I was going to perform in. And some of those shows, it would take me the whole day to play the concert because the electricity would go out, So anyway, that swim was pretty amazing. That's like one of my top 3 full moons, right? And another one is at the top of a peak in northern Utah, where I ended up as a ski bum hiking up this thing in the middle of the night with 3 other crazy ski bums, and there we were in a full moon. It was a storm that had stormed for 4 days, and normally you would hire a snowcat to get up there, but it was in the middle of the night. It was lit by the full moon. And that was another one. Another one would be just my 3-year-old loves to walk outside and look at the moon and just wants me to hold him and look at the moon. But anyway, like I said, just there's so many things to talk about once you get into that side of me, which is the Jazz for Peace side, which was an extension of my journey as a jazz musician. Gail did give me a couple of, questions already. And if anyone wants to ask a question, please feel free to. One of the advice you received from an older musician, I thought was a good question that she said. I had the good fortune to play with just some amazing musicians, not just as a sideman, but also as a leader. And especially when I played, when I would play with these guys as a leader, they would generally say, it was kind of almost a collective thing, like, hey, we're going to give you, because sometimes I'd be with like 3 jazz greats and me, in the band. I mean, I remember showing up for a week once at Ronnie Scott's, and like everyone was like Sonny and Victor, they were like the other guys, and I was like, well, you're right. Those are, those guys have been here before. This is my first time to play a week at Ronnie Scott's, and most of these guys would say basically, hey, we're going to give you advice, and you ultimately have to like digest it and decide whether or not you should, take that advice, use that advice, run with those specific words. So, that I thought was very interesting advice that I've received from numerous people. So it's not just one person. It's kind of like, I think elderly statesmen feel that in general. They feel like, hey, you need to make the decision, but we're going to help you with our stories, our suggestions, just they're gonna shoot things your way, and then you're going to ultimately take the responsibility to make the call as to whether you would follow that specific advice in that specific way, et cetera, et cetera. So current projects was also kind of interesting because I've been doing a lot of podcasts because of this, situation. I think because I didn't do a lot of podcasts before, and I decided, I should do something special for each of these podcasts. That would be interesting rather than just, up here and talk. I could do something that kind of strung them all along so that people could check out something on each podcast if they wanted to. And I ended up in an interesting situation because I was talking about free jazz, and we lost a jazz musician last week, Dr. Lonnie Smith. And I'm at the age now where there seems to be 6 degrees of separation with almost everybody. And I'm going to just show you this for example, because I remember when Lonnie, when I heard he passed away, I was like, wow, that's terrible. And I was like, too bad I don't really have such, because, it's rare that keyboard players would get to play with each other. It's incredible when they do, by the way. It's incredible, but it's not in people's mindset that often. It's very rare that you would get, to like play a tune with Dr. Lonnie Smith, even if you knew him, on a stage. But I was telling somebody that when I heard about it, I was like, wow, that's interesting, because there was a time when I was doing some tours of Florida. For whatever reason, I was just going down there and don't play in different cities and then making these little tours happen in the state of Florida. And I knew there were 2 guys down there that were just shocking that they were there. One of them was Dr. Lonnie Smith. The other one was Sam Rivers, which brings me around to free jazz. Sam was, such a great all-around player, but he was a pioneer of that loft jazz scene, which was really impressive to me growing up, that these guys would do that. They would make their own, and it ties into alternative venues for jazz too, because these were alternative venues. We were in like apartments that used to be like sewing machine, it used to be, back in the day, there's these large apartments, they still exist downtown here in New York. They're these big, large, like flat apartments where maybe there used to be rows of sewing machines and workers in the 1920s or 30s, and these musicians used them as performance spaces, and they played, free jazz. And so anyway, to tie in those 2 guys, I'm on a tour now, one of these little tours, little mini tours, right? And I show up at this place. Here's a low point. I'm at the low point of my tour because I show up at a place. I didn't know it was St. Patty's Day. Okay, so it's St. Patrick's Day. I show up there and there's people. Like the only difference between New Year's Eve and this day was that the beer was green. These people had, giant St. Patrick's Day hats, and they're blowing these whistle, these things, and they want me to be their St. Patrick's Day entertainment. And, like I'm getting jazz money, but I'm not getting to, you know what I mean? I'm not getting St. Patrick's Day money. So it was a tough situation for me. I knew I had to switch gears and go back to my, entertainment piano bar days where I know what to do when I get these guys, but it's not what I had in mind, to go all the way down to Florida to do that. I had musicians that we wanted to, so we're, appeasing them to do what we got to do, to go over. And, oh, good. Some people saying hello, etc. Thanks for joining. And so here I am. It's kind of a low point. Now we're kind of sneaking in our music after a while because, they're appeased. They've had their good time. They're having fun and all that stuff. And now we can do our thing. And all of a sudden I see this guy and I'm like, is that him? And I ask the other musician, is that him? What's he doing here? What is Lonnie Smith doing at this club? This place of all the. So I'm thinking, I'm just going to go up and ask him, what's a nice guy like you doing in a joint like this? And he said, I came here to welcome you to the family of Gina. So can you imagine? And so he came there. I guess it was near where he lived. I don't know where he lived in Florida, but it must have been striking distance of this place. And he just came to welcome me to the family of, touring people coming to Florida, just say, well, just to do that. And so you can imagine there was the high point of my tour, on the same night, the low point and the high point. But getting back to Sam Rivers, we did the Jasper Peace Big Band down there. And it was near, I said, where is this place where they want this? And I noticed it was near Orlando. I was like, oh, Sam Rivers lives near Orlando. Let's call somebody from his big band. Let's find out who's in that big band, because anybody who's playing with Sam Rivers Big Band is going to be golden for this gig. It was 3-night engagement with the Jasper Peace Big Band. And what I did was that, I flew down a conductor, so that I could concentrate on my thing and he could handle the musicians and the music and the charts and all that stuff. And we used all musicians from the Sam Rivers Big Band. So, if he wasn't down there and his spirit and having a big band and all that stuff, I mean, I probably would have never been able to, have the success that I was able to have there, by just drawing from those musicians who were obviously so enlightened by his experiencing him, during that time. But anyway, so back to this free jazz thing. I was on a podcast and I'm telling a story about how I would sometimes just do that in my shows. We would just do something free at some point or other in the show. And other musicians do that too. Just you don't have to be a free jazz musician the whole set. You might just put some in there, which I love to do. So I'm on the show, I'm on the podcast, and I said, jazz, I don't think you know this, but jazz is a misspelled word to begin with. And the guy's like, what are you talking about? So I said, yeah, it's comes from a Creole word called JASS. And I knew this because when I went to New England Conservatory to study, there was this guy who had a real traditional Dixieland band, friend of mine, good, wonderful cat, John Seiger. And he had this, I saw him spell it, the Bourbon Street Jazz Band, JASS. And I didn't really talk to him much about it, even though me and him, had some pretty wild, pretty fun times down there. But I knew it had something to do with authenticity, because that's what he was about with his Bourbon Street Band. It was big on authenticity. And so that I knew there was something about this JASS. So we go, one day I go to Haiti. And speaking of Ghana and Haiti, I show up to Haiti and it looks like Ghana, and nobody knows that. And by the end of my trip, I finally said, how come you guys don't know that your island looks like Ghana? And they said, how come nobody's ever told you that? Because probably no one's ever been to both Haiti and Ghana. People have maybe been to Ghana, maybe been to Haiti, but going to both, I don't know. So I get there, and at my show is a big sign, and it says, welcome, Jasper Peace, JASS. So what I did was I figured, since the word's misspelled anyway, let's take the ZZ off, and we'll take the SS off too, since that's the original Creole spelling, and let's just call this little piece Free JA. And now this piece, the title anyway, has an incredible meaning as far as the current situation we're in. And I think you people know what I'm talking about. I hope you do. So I'm going to do this now just for a couple minutes so I can get this in here, and people can come to this podcast when they go to the other podcasts that I do this little ditty that I just make up off the top of my head. I don't even know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do a little something now for that. Okay, so thank you for indulging me with that, and I hope uh, it's another one of my crazy ideas that happens to work out. That's the kind of another strange thing about me is I kind of come up with crazy ideas, like maybe we should free this guy with music, and maybe people should participate in such a way, and maybe it'll get such a result. And most people think, that's pretty crazy, but you'd be surprised at some of the crazy things that I've thought of, which, eventually led to the results that I saw Gail post when she posted, because she asked for a bio, and when I gave her that, she decided to post a bunch of the achievements of Jasper Peace. And when I look at those achievements, it's almost like I was kind of a conduit. I don't feel like maybe I should take full credit. And I don't even know if we should take full credit for the music, because the music kind of comes through us, and it may come from a higher power. It may be something that we allow to come through us. So I think, by having that open kind of mind, you end up thinking things that are a little bit out of the box, but not really, they're not really unattainable, especially when you look at history. A lot of times people look at where we are now and they think, oh, that's impossible. But if you look at other times in history when things weren't, this way, and you see that it was possible maybe on this time or that time, etc. So an interesting thing about now is, because I've done so many things with Jasper Peace, we do concerts that help outstanding causes. And I've come to realize that if you were to, find the world's greatest causes, the ones that are really the most dedicated and the most autonomous, I think that's a great word, and committed to achieving their mission, you could solve a lot of problems by helping them. But there's a zillion of them, and a lot of times we don't know, who to help, who's what. And there's also cyclical issues. We're in late stages of capitalism. There's something called the fourth turning, which, kind of divides these cycles into like 90 years. And now we're at the fourth one, which is a very, almost like a warlike sort of time, or a kind of a purging, where we kind of get to the bottom of things. And one thing that's kind of interesting is that you get to the point where things get so distorted that you can actually turn it upside down and find the answer. So you can almost find the answer by doing the opposite of what is currently there. It's almost like you just flip it backwards, and now you have the solution. And so we can solve a lot of the problems. Another thing that I've noticed is that, there's that quote. So I should tell you about that quote. After 9/11, I wrote a poem called Jasper Peace, and I wrote it on 9/11 because I was watching it from my building, the building where I lived in the East Village, less than a quarter of a mile away. So I really was in a, catbird sort of seat. I had like a front row seat to this situation. And the only thing I could react was to write a poem. And not that I've ever been, a poet per se. I mean, I consider myself a lyricist, and I've wrote lyrics to a lot of things. I just had someone contact me because I wrote lyrics to that great Billy Strayhorn tune, Isfahan. And someone contacted me. He was a movie producer. He wants to do something on Jasper Peace. We'll see if what happens with that. But he's like, I heard your lyrics. I heard your performance of Isfahan. I've got to take you to Iran someday. He speaks Persian and he wants to show me around. So little things like that. But that quote. So what happened was I wrote a poem, And the poem was read at the Savannah Jazz Festival in Savannah, Georgia, where I was headlining. It was about 8,500 people there, or something like that. It's that kind of number. So a lot of people heard this poem, and the musicians on the stage were touched. I was playing with Lenny White, the drummer, and Eddie Gomez, bass player, and I saw that they were moved. There were some people crying in the audience, and I was like, "Wow, this was this is an emotional minute here." So I get back, and the people I had another concert with, we were picking up a horn player that I'm sure you all know, Paquito de Rivera, was going to do a quartet thing with us, and I put it to music. So there was a preview for that concert where they called me. A guy called me and was just talking to me. I didn't know he had the recording on. I didn't even know if it was going to be an article. He called me, "Hey, I'm from the such and such. I just want to talk to you a little bit about this thing. Tell me about it," and blah blah blah. And he had asked me to read the poem. He had asked me to, I heard about this poem. Can you tell me what it is? And so I recited the poem. And then I was just talking to him about other stuff. And I just, off the top of my head, I said what you saw on there. I said, when we fill our souls up with creativity, artistry, and intelligence, things of that nature, I think I threw in, we have a better chance. Now, I'm not saying 100%, and of course not, but you increase your chances of avoiding the behavior that leads to destruction. So now that sentence means a lot, because we're having so many issues, in the Middle East, around the world, issues with people on the verge of destructive behavior, and destructive behavior already happening and has already happened. So increasing our chances is, I guess, very, very important right now. You want to have the best chance to avoid it if you can, to avoid this kind of destruction that is, such a big threat, threatening us, threatening, the arts, threatening jazz artists, threatening all things that are good, really. I mean, our species in a sense. There's an important word right now. It's called what's that word? It's related to the climate, but what it is, it means is it a multiplying thing? Where it multiplies on top of itself. Right now, I can't remember the word, but if that's the case, we've got a very serious situation with our climate. So that little sentence that I said off the top of my head got picked up and started to appear in these famous quotes, websites that I didn't even know existed. And a lot of times I'm searching for something, someone will ask me, well, when was the last time you were into Portland? Can you send us some information? Because we want you to come back to Portland, whatever. And I'll try to find it on Google, and I'll find something else. I'm looking for this, I'm finding that. And I would find these websites that were, listing me in that quote. And one was somebody, his favorite, someone came up, so-and-so's favorite 50 quotes. And he had me in there with all these, Gandhi and Einstein and all these people. So I'm like, I'm going to read, I better read this company I'm with. And I go to that site, and I'm like, these quotes are amazing by these other people. And so that's why I would suggest, if I was going to suggest advice to give to younger musicians to keep them encouraged, something Gail said. And I would say, check out the quotes from these great people. If you want to get to them, you could type in Rick Dellaratta famous quote, and you'll see those pages. And just check out some other people. Aldous Huxley. I didn't know who he was. I should have. But that's how you get educated. You realize, gee, the more smart you are, the more dumb you realize you were, kind of thing. And the more, then it opens up another box. It's the same with practicing, by the way, with young musicians. This, probably many of you that are musicians that will watch this or might be watching. You're working on something, and then once you master that, it opens up another thing. And then you're like, for a while, you're like, how could I even play the piano and not be able to do that? So now you feel, and then you master that, but that opens another window. And it's the same with learning. But if you check out these quotes by these incredibly intelligent, amazing people, you will be inspired. You will be inspired by what they've said. And another thing I want to say to people, since I know we're getting towards the end of this, is I've outlived a lot of the people that I admired, that I looked up to, the people that I really, really, I felt like they had the substance, they had what it took, to be my heroes. So, I think it's important that we realize that, we might be getting messages that, oh, a glamorous life would be great, and wouldn't it be great to do this and do that? But then when you look at the people that you admire, the people that you really care for, the people that you think are your heroes, you'll see their lives weren't glamorous at all. They struggled, they stood for what they believed in, and they really, they really delivered things that some of them died. A lot of them died at like age 34, or 39, if you want to get people like Bird and Train. But they accomplished things that live for probably forever. So I want to, let people know that, there's a little bit of a miscommunication with the subliminal messages we're getting and what really is what our soul is telling us. Don't be surprised if that disturbs you from now and then, and just, get to the point where you can say to yourself, would I want to trade? I wouldn't mind that, but would I trade what I have? And the answer is usually going to be no. Usually you're going to find that, gee, I really need, I'd like to do that, but I really need to, pursue this journey of the arts and music and truth and, and intelligence and empowerment. So that's something I would just like to say to people who might get discouraged. Just keep that in mind. And, just keep in mind that these people, they did that so we could be inspired by them. And then we can do what we do, which I hope will be people, looking at what we've done with Jasper Peace and being a part of, joining us and being a part of what we do. So I want to thank you all so much for, viewing this today. And I want to thank Gail, of course, and everybody else and everyone else who comes on these shows. Some of the past guys have been great. So listen, everyone, take care and thank you so much.